Good evening, my third grade reading class. We are going to start with a warm-up today, so get out your writing journals and something to write with. And look up at the screen. I have a picture up on the screen. Can you guys see what that is?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want you to look at this picture and write what it makes you think of. So what comes to your mind when you see this picture? If you can't see it very clearly, it's a little girl. She's in a paper airplane above the world right here, and there's stars all over here. So just write at least a sentence, maybe two. And I'll give you a couple of minutes. Okay, is everybody ready?
Yes, ma'am.
In Paris?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, does anybody want to share what they wrote? Annie?
I want to fly really high to the moon. I want to meet the man in the moon.
Very good, thank you. How about somebody in Paris?
I said a little girl dreaming that she's in a paper airplane flying over the world.
Awesome, thank you for sharing. Okay, so today we're going to be learning how to make connections when we read. And this is really important because that way we can better understand what we're reading and we can relate to it better. So we're going to be learning about 3 different types of connections. The first one, I'm going to put it on the document camera, is called text to self. Text to self connections is when you're reading and what you're reading reminds you of a time. So it reminds you of a personal experience, something that's happened to you in your life. So if I was reading a book, let's say, that had something to do with basketball, I could say, well, I played basketball when I was in middle school. So that would be a text to self connection. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The second type of connection we're going to be learning is text to text. A text to text connection reminds you of another story or another book, some other text that you've read before. So the story that we're going to read today really reminds me of this other book that I've read, because in the story the girl can't do something and it in another book, the character had that same problem, and that would be a text-to-text connection. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The last one is called text-to-world. A text-to-world connection makes you think of something that's in the world. So this is more of like an idea or a concept that you think of when you're reading. So like the story that we're going to read today, it makes me think of how it's good to encourage other people because you never know what's going to happen. And that would be a text-to-world connection because it reminds me of an idea or something in the world. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Do you mean like maybe what's going on in the news?
It could be something like that. Just something that you've heard of or seen in the world. Does that make
Does it have to
sense?
be current events or could it be past?
No, it could be past. It could be anything really that you've seen or heard about
Okay.
that you can relate to the story. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, as we are listening and watching to this story, I want you to be thinking about these connections. I want you to think of one of each type of connection. Okay, so a text to self, a text to text, and a text to world. Okay? And whenever we're through reading the story, we're going to write those down and we're going to share. Okay? Does everybody know what we're doing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's watch the video.
The Dot. By Peter H. Reynolds. Our class was over, but Vashti sat glued to her chair. Her paper was empty. Vashti's teacher leaned over the blank paper. Ah, a polar bear in a snowstorm, she said. Very funny, said Vashti. I just can't draw. Her teacher smiled. Just make a mark and see where it takes you. Vashti grabbed a marker and gave the paper a good, strong jab. There. Her teacher picked up the paper and studied it carefully. She pushed the paper toward Vashti and quietly said, "Now sign it." Vashti thought for a moment. Well, maybe I can't draw, but I can sign my name. The next week, when Vashti walked into art class, she was surprised to see what was hanging above her teacher's desk. It was the little dot she had drawn. Her dot, all framed in swirly gold. I can make a better dot than that. She opened her never-before-used set of watercolors and set to work. Vashti painted and painted. A red dot, a purple dot, a yellow dot, a blue dot. The blue mixed with the yellow. She discovered that she could make a green dot. Vashti kept experimenting, lots of little dots in many colors. If I can make little dots, I can make big dots too. Vashti splashed her colors with a bigger brush on a bigger paper to make bigger dots. Vashti even made a dot by not painting a dot. At the school art show a few weeks later, Vashti's many dots were quite a splash. Vashti noticed a little boy gazing up at her. "You're a really great artist. I wish I could draw," he said. "I bet you can," said Vashti. "Me? No, not me. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler." Vashti smiled. She handed the boy a blank sheet of paper. "Show me." The boy's pencil shook as he drew his line. Vashti stared at the boy's squiggle, and then she said, "Sign it." The end.
Okay. So I'm going to give you several minutes, and I want you to write down the connections that you made. A text to self. Remember, that's making a connection to a time or something that we remember that's happened to us. A text to text, which reminds us of another book or story that we've read. And a text to world, which reminds us of something that happens in the world. Okay, and in a few minutes, we're going to share. Yes, ma'am.
What's the text to text again?
Text to text reminds you of something else that you've read. So a story or a book that reminds you of something in the story that we read.
What was the text to self?
Text to self reminds you of a time. So something that's happened to you that reminds you of what we saw in the story. Something personal that you've experienced. All right, is everybody about ready? Okay, does anybody want to share their text to self example? Yes, Chloe.
I related to not being a very good artist.
Me too. That's a good connection. Thank you. Does anybody else have one?
Wanting to do better than you done something previously.
That's a good one. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody have a text to text connection that they'd like to share? Annie.
Okay, so there's this series of books called Biscuit, and Biscuit's a dog, and in every book, Biscuit goes on an adventure, and it's always something he can't do very well, but usually by the end of the story, Biscuit can do it.
Ah, that's a good one. Thank you. Okay. Jessica?
And I read a book, it was Little Bear, and they were drawing pictures, him and his friend Lucy, and Little Bear's was better than, or Lucy thought Little Bear's was better, and Little Bear made Lucy feel better about her drawing, just like the teacher did in the video.
Oh, so he encouraged her just like the teacher. Good. I like that. Okay. Does anybody have a text to world connection?
I do.
Annie?
Okay, so Vashti drew an orange circle that was beautiful and had nice colors that were blended. And I was thinking that in the world we see sunsets that have beautiful colors blended.
Perfect. That's a very good text to world. Thank you. Did you have one, Jessica?
It gave me an idea to always try and encourage others in the world.
That's good. I like it. Tawala, did you have one?
Yes, I said people look up to others' successes and talents, even when the person that they're looking up to may not think they've done anything special.
Good. Perfect. I like that. Okay. So let's review. What did we learn about today?
We learned about texting.
Texting. Not quite.
We learned about reading concepts.
Comprehensions.
Comprehension. Chloe?
Making a connection from a book to ourselves.
Good. Yeah. Okay. So if I said the story reminded me of how my dad used to encourage me as a kid when I couldn't do something, what kind of connection would that be?
Text to self.
Text to self.
Text to self. Very good. Okay. Let's see. A text to world connection is when you make a connection to what? What does it remind you of?
An idea.
An idea, right? Something that you see in the world. Good. All right. Thank you guys for all your input.